What's up, Internet? You're tuned into episode 9 of Nintendo Noise, Flip Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. Of course, I am your host, joined as... Oh, wait, no, I have to say my name there. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friends, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello.
The mayor of Haken, Mr. Chuy Huerta.
Hey, how's it going?
And joining us for the first time on the show, Richard, a.k.a. Nintendomau5 from My Nintendo News. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for being here.
I like that.
Yeah, we got to give you the golf clap, you know? Just
Just a tiny one.
give it the pomp and circumstance it deserves, but we don't want to, you know, I'm loud enough. I don't want to blow out everybody's hearing right away with a thunderous round of applause, you know? But yes, thank you so much for joining us, Richard. If people don't know you, real quickly, just give them the elevator pitch, who you are, what you do on the internet, you know, why you're here talking about Nintendo.
Oh, I always find this bit really awkward, but I'll give it a go. So yes, I'm Richard from MyNintendoNews.com, one of the top Nintendo sites in the world, or most popular rather, and I do the reviews, previews, events, and all the other bits for it. And I'm also lead editor at gpn.gg, which is a new Xbox-centric website. And I'm also the owner of Together We Play, an all-inclusive Discord server for the LGBTQI plus community.
Awesome.
That's me.
Well, you'll have to give us a link to that, too, and we'll throw the link to the
Yes.
Discord down below so that if anybody wants to go join up, yeah, please, we'll have the link down below.
Cool.
Richard, you know, we're burying the lead a little bit here. Of course, we're very excited to have you on the show, and you are here to talk two things in great detail, or as much detail as we legally can, which are, of course, the Switch OLED and Metroid Dread. We are so excited to pick your brain. We have a ton of questions from the community. But before we jump into all that, let me just real quickly tell you guys who we are, where you can find us. But before I even do that, I'm going to tell you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of October. Thank you all so much for your support. They are, of course, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valens, a.k.a. That Doc Guy. Asobi, you said last time that Steve said your last name right.
You told us. I got it right.
So you nailed the bet. But Asobi also said that he wasn't sure if he wanted us to say his full name next time. So I'm going to say it. We're going to do it this time, and you let us know about next time. Steve, you say it.
Gabriel Hasselmeyer.
Nailed it. A.k.a. Asobi, of course. And then Wakahula and Zaid Ida, thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames, where, of course, for just $2 at any level of support, you can get access to our Patreon exclusive show, One More Thing, where we keep the mics rolling and we talk about what's going on in our lives outside the world of video games. Last week, Steve and I answered a little bit of listener mail for the first time ever from Asobi, which was very cool. Thanks for writing in, Asobi. And we also talked about episode 1 of the new season of Bake Off/Bake Show, depending on where you live. And Steve talked about whose accents he thought were gross. So go check that out. He comes off like a real mean girl, but, you know, I thought it was pretty funny.
Hey. do you watch Bake Off, Richard?
I used to, and I didn't even realize it was still on. Is it back on?
It's back on as of the last 2 weeks. So this week they did Jammy Dodgers. Which I'm looking forward to Pete's reaction on what a Jammy Dodger is.
I think the best thing is I didn't realize how much drama could be surrounded by cooking. It's fantastic. I'll have to give it a watch, actually.
Truly, truly incredible television. So yeah, if you want to hear us wax about that a little bit, you can go check that out. It's, of course, the best way to show your support. And we've got a bunch of levels with a bunch of different cool perks, including the newest one on the Blue Coin level, where you can get access to the archive of all of our streams over on twitch.tv/flipscreengames, where every Thursday Steve and I are there playing some games. Sometimes Chuy comes and hops in if he's not busy, which he always is, but he still finds time for us. God bless him. What a sweet boy. What are we playing this week, Steve? I'm not going to be on the show. I'm going to be at Comic-Con. So what are you playing?
I kind of fancy playing the Clubhouse games. Everyone was obsessed with that, and I had no idea that this collection of games was so popular because it kind of went under the radar. But I want to beat everyone at Mancala, including Chuy. So I'm looking forward to setting up some kind of championship.
There we go.
You're about to be disappointed.
Yeah, Steve, I love you, bud, but I don't think you're going to beat Chuy at any game that Chuy has tried once before. That's... My man's a machine.
No, there's definitely a good part of that collection that I'm just like, oh man, I don't know how to play this at all. I got destroyed at Connect 4, whatever their version of Connect 4 is on there. But Mancala, that's my game. So
I might have to take you up on that offer. Actually, I'm really good at it. So
Come on through.
yes,
Do it.
yeah, I think
awesome,
I'm
yeah.
gonna have to get involved with this.
I
Fly
love
the
that.
British flag.
Gonna
We can
take it
take
home
it
for
there, don't
England.
Together we can do it, Steve.
And then, of course, last week we streamed the the first half of Chapter 1 of Deltarune. With Steve's first ever playthrough. We had a great time. Of course, that's available on YouTube for patrons now, so go check it out. And then there are, a ton of ways you can get in touch. If you want to be like all the fine folks in our question block segment or writing in for our main topics did this week, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can hit us up on Twitter at FlipScreenGames. You can come join our Discord where we always keep the conversations rolling after every episode and, source questions for the next week. And then, of course, if you're an old person, you can write in at questions@flipscreen.games. Email. There's still a thing. Go check it out. All right, so speaking of questions, there are a ton, and I want to get to them all, and I know Richard has a heart out, so let's jump right into the Switch OLED and Metroid Dread impressions. Where do we even start, right? I guess us on the outside who haven't gotten hands on it yet, right? We know the talking points that have been kind of sold to us, the screen quality, speakers, kickstand, all that stuff. Just in general, I guess, initial impressions, what was your first reaction to getting hands on the Switch OLED, Richard?
So I originally went in with I was quite skeptical because I love my Switch. I've had it since day one. I didn't really think, it's not the 4K Switch or the Pro Switch or whatever anyone wants to call it. It's not that. So I was kind of like, well, what's the point? What's the point in having this OLED Switch, when the one that we have is perfectly fine. But yeah, absolutely blown away with it, to be fair. So I got invited to a behind closed doors kind of preview of it a couple of months ago, before quite a lot of Nintendo saw it. And it was in this hotel in London in a basement. It's not as dodgy as it sounds. And
are you sure this was an officially sanctioned event?
It was. It definitely was. It was. Yeah. It was great. And actually, yeah. First impressions, were really, really good. I've been able to spend some more time with the Switch OLED model. And yeah, absolutely. I'm not here to advertise it. I don't work for Nintendo and I'm not officially affiliated with them. But yeah, absolutely. I think it makes I want to replay all those games again. Zelda and all the rest of it. And Mario Kart looked incredible. So kind of evergreen titles, I think, probably safe to say they're the ones that are going to shine on this OLED model. And if you don't play handheld, you will want to play handheld. Definitely.
That pulls in a great question here. This one comes from that guy, one of our Patreon producers, who wrote in and said, do you think the Switch OLED is worth picking up for someone who has a base Switch? I really only use my Switch docked, but I pulled it out now and again. So you feel like even if you're somebody who prefers docked, do you think that this is something that could maybe get you to want to play in handheld a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, after playing some more of Metroid Dread, for instance, which comes out this Friday, the screen is better than my TV behind me, and I spent a lot of money on that telly.
Okay.
I don't have an OLED TV. I have just a normal LED, I think. And yeah, so a lot of over the last few days, I've been trying bits and pieces out, and actually, the screen quality, there's no denying it, is better than my TV personally. The screen quality is better on the OLED. So to answer their question, absolutely, it will surprise you on how much you will want to play handheld, because the graphics aren't better. The screen's bigger, but the graphics aren't better. But the fact that it's so vibrant just completely changes it. And I just don't. It's quite hard to market that. Do you see what I mean? You can't have that on, on the internet. You can't have it in print magazines or anything like that. You have to see it. You really do.
And being able to compare and contrast them back to back, I'm sure helps a lot.
Yeah, and I think so. Now that I've seen them side by side, and Nintendo have been quite strict with what people can show. And I'm not mentioning any YouTubers here, but I know some have broken embargo and shown them side by side. And I kind of think to myself, why are you stopping people from showing them that way?
To show how objectively better it looks? Yeah, that seems crazy.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the whole Switch Pro route, but I don't know, maybe, I don't know, maybe they don't want people to see it side by side, but I think that the same people are going to be in that position that the person who sent the question in. A lot of people are going to be in that position, like, why should I upgrade? But it is a case, and as cheesy as it sounds, you have got to see it to believe it, I think.
I think especially as Doc's seemingly, I don't know what he means by base switch, but I presume that means like a launch day switch, because I'm in the same boat there as well, and my battery, I don't know about UP, is like getting worse and worse and worse, and I don't know if you've got a launch day switch as well.
I do.
Chuy.
Yeah.
It's like that alone is making me consider getting one, along with the fact that it comes with this bigger screen and it looks so much nicer. But what about some other bits? Because I know I've read that just the build quality seems better. It's got that better kickstand, the speakers, things like that. Other than the screen, do you think it's an improvement over the base original Switch?
Yeah, but very slightly. So it comes in pretty much the same weight. So, if you were to close your eyes and have one in each hand, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So in terms of the actual casing as such, it does feel very much the same. There's not really much in it, and the Joy-Con may be white, but they're exactly the same Joy-Con. I was told explicitly by Nintendo that there's no difference whatsoever. Obviously, no one has done a teardown of that, so we don't know for sure, but I was told by Nintendo that they're the same. Now, in terms of the actual console itself, I think the main difference is going to be its dock. The dock is better. It does feel sturdier. You've got that grip on the bottom, which stops it from sliding around, and yeah, it's obviously in white as well. It just feels a bit more premium. But in terms of the actual console and the Joy-Con, there's not a huge amount of difference in it. But obviously with...
I just wanted to follow up on something you said there. You said that there's a new grip on the bottom. Is it like the whole bottom has a grip, or?
Yeah. So on the bottom of the dock, there's this pad on the bottom, which kind of just and it's weird. It's not spongy. It's almost a rubber. And I asked what it was made of, and they couldn't tell me. Probably some super secret thing they've
proprietary Nintendo rubber. Yeah. Sorry, we're not allowed to disclose that at this time.
They patented it like 4 years ago or something. But yeah, so I know it sounds like a really small thing, but for people,
no, that's why I stopped
young
you.
Children,
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So when you have it sat on your desk, or you have it sat on your TV stand or anything like that, that thing won't budge. Mm-hmm. So it's not sticky, but it is really grippy, and it does make it stay in place, absolutely. But I can confirm that in terms of size, they're both exactly the same, I believe.
That sounds like even a slight upgrade, because I do have a launch Switch and I have the Animal Crossing Switch, which was kind of updated, but I definitely noticed the grip on the Animal Crossing one was like improved and everything. But this sounds like it's still kind of just like 4 little studs on each corner or something, but this sounds like it's an actual big grip for it.
Yes, so the grip is rounded, but it's underneath the whole of the base rather than at the 4 corners, which I believe
That's awesome.
Obviously the ACNH one has, and the standard one. But it's across the whole thing, so you can't see it. It's kind of hidden. But yeah, it definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah, like
Do you know if that dock works with the old Switch?
No, I'm not sure of that at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay.
You probably have to go to the support website.
I'm not at liberty to say. I feel like whenever we hit a question like that, I can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, exactly. I believe they do. Yes, but the obviously the dock, the only difference is the dock has, I think they've shifted some of the USB ports around. And can you remind me, on the original dock, do they have 2 USB on the side?
Yes.
Or one USB. So they
yeah.
have 2 USB on the side. So on the new dock, I think they've got rid of one of the USB slots in the back and replaced it with LAN, which is obviously the main selling point of the new dock.
Yeah. Which is fine. I don't really feel like you need 2 in 2 spots. Like, as long as you can plug in the Smash adapter, like, you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can always get splits. So
Sure.
yeah.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the quality of the screen and how it compared to your television. This takes us into another question. This one came from at Mr. Marco Anamoto on Twitter. This is actually one of my co-hosts at the Comics Pals. Thanks for writing in, Marco. And he said, do these OLED models offer true black with no backlight? To what degree will it benefit contrast, and is it perceptible on games like Dread, which will likely employ darker areas and maps?
Yeah, so I think the question mainly involves around how good is the OLED, doesn't it? I think so. So when I tried the games out again, I think it was Mario Kart, and I played the first 20 minutes of Breath of the Wild, and you can definitely notice the difference. Like, the blacks are black and the whites are white. Obviously, with TVs now, with smart TVs, I don't know about yours, guys, but mine has like an auto dimming feature, which is annoying because it feels like there's spotlights jumping around at the bottom of your TV. I'd like to say I've got a decent one, but I don't know if that's kind of I can notice it quite a lot. You don't obviously get any of that with the OLED screen. So one thing I'm noticing while playing with more time with the console is, the colors are much more vibrant. And especially when you turn off the auto dim or the auto brightness, you can really see those colors pop. And it makes me want to get an OLED TV, but I'm not a millionaire yet, so not happening.
Yeah, Steve has one, and I have a QLED because we can't control ourselves. Pandemic hit, and we're like, if I'm not going outside, I'm getting a better television, you know?
I definitely do want to get one. So you guys obviously know what OLED kind of offers, but to have that in your...
I kind of think most people do, though, because it's on most mobile phones these days. Like, when you're in bed and you're looking at your phone, you don't get like a bright background if you're on like dark mode or anything. And I'd imagine it's a similar situation to that.
Yeah, it is. And I thought about this before I came on, because I don't know if my phone has OLED, but the colors are vibrant enough, etc. But when you're playing with the OLED, it just feels different because you're on a Nintendo console. It's almost like, I kind of wish, sorry, we're deviating slightly, but I kind of wish this is what we got at the beginning. So I've obviously had some time with the OLED. Our full impressions are going up this week at my Nintendomau5.com. Not by myself, but by one of my colleagues. And it's only when you go back to your original Switch do you really notice the difference. It is really noticeable. But yeah, so it's decent.
I'm so excited by that because I've never once looked at the Switch screen and been like, this looks bad, right? Like, I've never felt like the screen was the thing that needed an upgrade. So the fact that like it's so much noticeably better is like, it's a really exciting prospect.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea to, the screen is clearly the star of the show. There's absolutely no denying that. But having a closer look at the Switch OLED model, it's the smaller changes which are good as well. So you've got the speakers are now running just under the flap at the back, at the kickstand. So the speakers are actually running underneath, and they're both about that big.
Okay.
Rather than two little slits or whatever the OG one has. So it's things like that. And then also the kickstand, when I was looking at the OLED model the other day, and it's really hard to kind of describe. So when you've got the kickstand out, on the bottom of the console in each corner, just near the Joy-Con, are two little rubber wheels, almost like half wheels. So they're just sitting underneath there. So when you've got the kickstand out, it doesn't shift. It's a really, just these odd little placements of things really do make the difference, especially if you want to play tabletop mode. But yeah, it's the small details as well, and the smaller bezel obviously gives the impression of a larger screen, and then with the white Joy-Con, it just makes things feel more premium.
I'm a sucker for white technology. Like I love a piece of tech with a nice clean white borders. So like I feel like that's going to be such a treat to look at.
Yeah, definitely does make the difference.
Did you have something, Chuy?
Yeah, I did. You've mentioned that you have felt more like playing in handheld as well. I was kind of wondering, like, what were your habits with your old Switch prior to this? Were you more docked or more handheld?
Admittedly, I kind of fell out of love with handheld gaming, really, which was odd. I had a 3DS and all the rest of it, but I really dropped out of 3DS quite early on. Loved the DS, went to 3DS and didn't really think much of it, and then became more of a TV gamer. Especially like with Nintendo. But when I got the Switch, the handheld element felt like a novelty, and it sat in my dock pretty much probably 80% of the time. But as kind of my habits changed, and obviously the portability of it all, I started playing more handheld. And then obviously now the release is coming up for the OLED model. It's kind of like just come at a brilliant time personally for me. I often find myself, even before I got a bit more of a hands-on with the OLED, I found myself just sitting on the sofa playing handheld. And
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of the prospect of retrying all those things, but on a nicer screen and a bigger screen, is really exciting. I don't think it's going to change the game, but I definitely want to revisit the library again, and I can definitely tell the percentage of handheld to docked is going to change.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
I always find that to be a really interesting question. I remember it was maybe like a year or two into the Switch's life cycle when Nintendo kind of put out that infographic that was like, oh, like this is the breakdown, and it's really basically 50-50 with a smaller number of people that actually split their time between the two. And I've always found that fascinating because I pretty much only play in handheld mode, and like I played Fire Emblem Three Houses almost entirely docked, and there's the odd game here or there that feels better, like Bowser's Fury. I wanted the maximum draw distance, so like there's times where it feels like more at home on the television screen, and obviously for multiplayer games and stuff like that, Smash, whatever, you're gonna want to go on the big screen. But yeah, it's so funny when I encounter someone who's like, oh yeah, like I never take it out of the dock, is like such a crazy, that feels so alien to me and how I interact with the Switch. But I guess that's really the beauty of it, right? Is like it's however you want to use it.
I think just having the option. I think just having the option is the best thing, and I can't really see Nintendo deviating. There's always talk about what the next model is going to be and all the rest of it, but I sincerely believe that the hybrid console will be the staple going forward.
Yeah.
I hope so. I don't want to go
we've
back.
talked about that in the past. Like, I would be genuinely mad if there was the alternative. I think at this point, like, it's such a. I use my Switch so much more than my Wii U, my 3DS, my Wii, and my DS combined, probably because of the fact that it's so versatile, and however I want to play, it can serve me.
Yeah, definitely.
So we had another question about the build of the Switch OLED that I wanted to get in here. This one comes from Trendy Brendy, another one of our Patreon supporters, who said, do you think burn-in will be a problem on the Switch OLED? I'm particularly worried about the static borders on the Nintendo Switch Online apps. Do you think that'll be an issue?
So I actually did some research about this the other day, and because I could see the question coming up on Twitter, I believe. And it has been a worry of some people, but theoretically, and apparently I can link to it afterwards, but apparently in order for OLED burn to occur, the same static screen has to be in place, unmoved for hundreds of hours. So the OLED only has the OLED's innards is a version 2 Switch. So you've got the improved battery life, fair enough. But if you take into account the higher contrast and that, obviously the lighter colors, that Switch is going to have to be turned off or have a rest at some point, even if you have it plugged in. No one's going to play for 200 hours straight. I've got no issue. I really don't think there's any issue with screen burning. But I guess we'll find out after the first 2 months, where some idiots probably tried it.
Yeah, that's going to be a YouTuber probably day one, just having something on screen for a very long time.
Live
but
as well.
Yeah, but as someone who has an OLED TV, this was a big worry of mine when I bought my OLED TV. But I've got an LG. They say that you're won't get burn in. They guarantee it for 5 years, so they're pretty confident that you won't get it on their TVs as well. And most of those have some kind of protection built in, so it does pixel shifting, so it'll move it 1 to 2 pixels where you can't even notice with your eye, so it's not in the same position. And it has pixel refresher, so when the TV's off, it actually refreshes the pixels. I don't know how it does it, but apparently that's what it does. And I'd imagine that Nintendo has similar things built into the Switch OLED.
I know a lot of the Samsung TVs will do something similar, where for example, if one of the only things that will actually keep the television on and not have it go into rest mode immediately is if I'm on say the channel for my Switch or my Xbox, but it's not turned on, and it'll just show the logo, and it just has super minor animations in the background to make sure that there's not a static image, and I think about how aggressively the Switch turns itself off when you're not using it. I think
or it dims the screen after about 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's are you using this? No? Okay, bye.
See ya.
So we should be all right, I think, on that. And then I guess there was one other very specific OLED question before we shift over to the Metroid Dread side of the fence. And this one comes from Andy Radford, another one of our Patreon supporters, a.k.a. Steve's dad, who wrote in and said, for someone who doesn't own a Switch, is it better to save money and buy an original, or is the OLED worth the extra money? I think this is an interesting question. I've seen this one come up a lot too, and I've had some casual people reach out to me and be like, "Oh, should I wait now? Have I missed my boat?" What do you think about that?
That is a really interesting question, actually, because the way in which Nintendo are marketing this console is kind of look, we've got this console coming out. You're either going to want it or not. I think if you're new to gaming or you haven't gamed in a while and you're on the fence about the Switch in general, and obviously you have the Switch Lite to choose from as well, it not to sound all corporate, but it really just depends on a couple of factors, really. Where are you going to play it? What would you want to play on it? And your budget, really. If you can get the Switch OLED and, comfortably purchase a Switch OLED, then absolutely go for the top model. Go for the top model because you have those options. You have the best screen. You can play docked and docked and tabletop and handheld. But yeah, if you're on the fence with it, go for the top model. But that's what I would do. It's still affordable.
Yeah, the price difference is so small,
And
it's actually gone there's a bigger difference now because they just reduced it in the UK. It's £70.
I guess that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they've reduced it in the UK, but they didn't reduce it outside of the UK, did they? There's been no other.
No.
So
it's a $50 difference, I think, in the States, right? Isn't it $300 and then $350?
Yeah, that's the difference.
$50 is that's a pretty negligible amount of money. It sounds for the amount
that's
of upgrades you're
WarioWare.
getting.
I mean, if you want to play on the OLED,
it's true.
Exactly. It'll melt your eyes in the process. But yeah, I think if you can go for the OLED, definitely go for the OLED. We're not going to see a Switch Pro for a good few years yet. So yeah, definitely.
I should add that my dad doesn't really play handheld games, so I kind of feel that for him,
don't bother them. No.
I wouldn't bother. He keeps waiting for them to do a home console version with no screen, and I'm just I don't.
It's
know
not
if
happening.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, I would definitely just if you're not planning on playing handheld and you want a home only, just get the old one.
Yeah, or I've even said there must be some on eBay broken with screens done in, just to get one of those and just keep it in a dock.
True.
You'll save so much money if all you're gonna do is play Mario Party on it when we come around.
Yeah.
Or Steve, you buy an OLED and you give your dad your Switch.
Also an
There
option.
we go.
Also an
There we
option.
go.
There we go. There we go. You save some money. So, we're not that we're going to be done talking about the hardware, but do either of you have any questions for Richard before we get into some of these Metroid Dread questions?
I guess the one question I've got is, have you pre-ordered one, and if so, what color?
Yes, I have got one on its way, and it's a white one because
Nice.
I think it's just because you can't get the white Joy-Con without doing your own versions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the white Joy-Con are nice, and after playing, and I also do have the Smash Brothers controller. So yeah, it kind of like works quite well. So yes. How about you, Stephen? Are you getting one?
No, I haven't ordered one yet. But I kind of feel like I want one after this conversation now, which I knew was going to be a problem going in.
It's so funny because I saw a couple people in our Discord say, "Oh yeah, like this conversation with Richard is going to be the thing that decides if I pick it up or not." And I was like, I have a feeling a lot of you are going to pick it up as soon as we started talking about it.
I think a good thing to do is probably just, I don't know if you guys have it over there as well, where you can just trade in your old console, especially around this time of year.
Yep.
Everywhere will snap it up because Christmas is around the corner, and some people won't bother about getting a new console to save some cash. So if you can afford it, I take no responsibility if anyone hates it, but I am finding it very hard. I'm finding it very hard to find anything wrong with it at the moment.
It's funny when you asked the question of what color he went with, Steve. I was like, did anyone get the colored one on purpose? Right? Like, I feel like
that was like the backup, like ran out of stock. Let's
every
get the
time.
neon one.
Yeah, every time I tried to pre-order it, like before I finally got my pre-order, it was like, oh, there's the colored ones are available. I was like, I'll wait.
I've been torn about that because I want the white Joy-Con, but I'd rather have a black dock.
Yeah, I'm the same because
Like,
all of my
I think the
consoles
white
are black.
dock is so
Everything in my
cool.
I don't want it
I
there.
want
It's going to be
it,
hidden
right.
behind my TV.
Yeah, I
Alright.
want to like mix and match.
Has anyone got a PS5? Has everyone got a
I
PS5?
do. It matches my PS5 and my Xbox is black, right? So it's like Xbox is black, the PlayStation is black and white, the Switch has got the white dock. It's it's a whole.
However, there is a caveat to this, and I'm sure someone on the internet will do it. I'm not allowed to put up photos yet, but I will do when I can. The white dock is, can I say this? Is slightly creamier than the PS5. It is not flat white.
Oh
That
no!
would drive me insane.
No, I'm gonna have to paint it.
So it's a nice white. It's a soft white, whereas the PS5 is a brilliant white.
Yeah,
and
it's like this is the headset. It's like
it's like
deep, like white.
It's crystal, it's like pearlescent white almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, the Switch dock. Don't put the Switch OLED white model dock near your PS5.
Well, the good thing is I have the way that my entertainment system works is they're on different shelves, and I've got like sliding barn doors, so you can never see both of them at the same time. So it'll be perfect.
They'll both look crystal white. It'll be fine.
Now that makes me wonder how that looks compared to like the Xbox Series S or the One S, because they're both like the white. Is that closer to the PS5?
I don't know. I've never seen one in person.
The Series S is pretty much bang on with what the PS5 is. It's like pure white.
It's not going to
you
go.
must have a white. The white on it, Pete, is like an Xbox 360 controller. So it's very similar white plastic to that. So I think that's closer to PS5 than like a creamy pearlescent.
By the way, can I just say I really appreciate the fact that we can talk about the color of white plastic and be interested. I absolutely love this. Thank you.
You're in good company here.
I found my people.
All right, so let's jump into some of these Metroid Dread questions. I know a lot of people in the community were very stoked to ask you about this. I'm pretty interested in it myself. So I guess before we even get into this, though, Richard, I'd love to ask, what is your background with Metroid? Are you a big Metroid fan? Is this your first foray?
So, yeah, I think a lot of people think journalists play every single game. I do not play every single game. However, I'll be completely honest with you. The Metroidvania genre. I'm not a fan of it, but that's what it's been.
Me neither.
I wasn't. I'm
Yeah,
not a fan
same.
of the phrase, and I wasn't a fan of the genre itself. You know, I've dipped into Hollow Knight, but then I fell in love with it with Ori. I love the Ori games. They're two of my favorite games probably ever. So then I kind of like delved into it a little bit, but I kind of missed a slightly big chunk of obviously the last 30 odd years or whenever the first one came out. So I've kind of dipped into a little bit in the 2D Metroid, but I absolutely adored Metroid Prime. So yeah, I have experience with the franchise, but not so much the 2D franchise.
So you're kind of like a more casual fan of Metroid. Like, you definitely dabbled here and there. I just wanted to establish a baseline so that the folks can get an idea of what your background is with it as we go into these questions.
Yeah, of course.
All right, great. So this first one comes from Asobi, one of our Patreon producers, who wrote in and said, "Oh my god, I have to take up this chance and ask, is Metroid Dread similar to any of the previous 2D Metroid games in terms of style and atmosphere, possibly fusion? Or does it feel like it's more its own? Also, from 1 to 10, how cool are the suit upgrades visually?"
So obviously each Metroid or each 2D Metroid has enjoyed enhancements, refinements, and all the rest of it. And I think Metroid Fusion is regarded, quite rightly so, as one of the best games ever. I think it's Metroid Fusion. And you know, in terms of atmosphere, the amount of Dread I've played so far is it's probably it's probably the creepiest Metroid, 2D Metroid. Okay. So the atmosphere is helped by, obviously, you've got HD graphics. It even looks good on the OLED. And I can't what's the word? I can't express how different it feels going from, you know, the sprites are great, don't get me wrong, like the old school graphics are brilliant, and you know the music is just incredible, but going to a full widescreen experience, HD, the rest of it is something else. It really is. Fans are going to love it. I can definitely tell. It's definitely a faithful last installment.
Building on that, I always find that to be an interesting conversation when you have kind of a franchise that is historically 2D and sprite based, and then it kind of makes the jump to that like 2.5D, you know, like we've got full 3D models and everything, but still in that 2D perspective. What is it about the style of Dread that is making that still feel authentic to Metroid versus some of the other ones where I feel like sometimes you get games like that and it feels like you lose a little something, you lose a little bit of that personality, like the art and style. Sure, great example, right? Like I feel like Dread is dripping with style and personality, even just in the bits we've seen of it so far. What do you think it is about the art direction that has kind of nailed that tone?
So I think a lot of it I think a lot of it's down to the environment. So for the purpose of this podcast, I will talk mainly about the first couple of hours of the game. And you can already tell, like, that sets the tone for where it's going to go. You've got, it never really pushes the 3D part of it. It bends, it merges between 3D and 2D quite a lot. There's quite a lot of toing and froing. Actually, no, that's a lie. There's not a lot, but it's done briefly enough for you to get another perspective on the action. I will obviously stay away from spoilers as well, because I understand how important it is to people. But there are parts in Metroid Dread that are quite cinematic, and I'm sure you can see that from the trailers. And you know, that is carried on for quite a while throughout the game, but yeah, it just it's stuck to its ways, but it's just tweaking and refining what everyone loves about the series. And you get that immediately when you start. As soon as Samus lands on ZDR, I can say that, then you immediately feel at home. It's really weird. You feel isolated, but you also feel like this warm feeling, like you're home. It's really odd. But as soon as you start it, you'll realize.
No, that's
awesome.
Cool.
I love that.
I'm curious as to whether this has kind of more of a, and I don't know if this is just marketing side of it, whether it feels a little bit more survival horror-y. With Emmy kind of chasing you all the time, it kind of gave me vibes of like Resident Evil 2, where you've got Mr. X always constantly hunting you. Did you get that feeling when playing the game at all?
So I'm personally, I've tried to break through this barrier. I never used to touch horror games. I used to hate them. He says wearing a Little Nightmares t-shirt, but it's and that kind of like the whole cat and mouse thing I find really interesting, especially for like a Nintendo game. Now I know Metroid isn't a kid's game, or it's not aimed at children, but it's really scary, like really scary. So your first encounter with an Emmy is a fairly short one, I can say, but it's a good introduction into the whole Emmy robots and kind of why they're there. But it's only when you start realizing what they can do and what they won't stop at is when you start to crap yourself. And I struggled. I died when I played that preview event. I died probably about 3 times, but you get a small window of opportunity to counter their action essentially, and then perform a move on them, which helps you get away. But good luck trying to do that.
All right, that sounds good. So this is probably a good question. This one comes from Trendy Brendy. How far did Richard get into Metroid Dread in the time limit? Did he make it out of Arteria? I think that's the name of the first area.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So I had 2 hours with the game officially, but I actually got to Nintendo HQ, like their building in Windsor, lovely place. I got there a little bit late, so I only had about an hour, probably about an hour and 20 minutes effectively with the game. I didn't make it out of Arteria, and we weren't allowed out of Arteria.
Okay, so if you had gotten to the end, that would have been the end of your demo anyway.
Yeah, I tell you what, the Watchful Eyes are constantly watching. They've got like pen and paper here and watching you over your shoulder pretty much. So yeah, you're only allowed up to a certain part. But I got I got used to the controls in my time. I explored a bit, looked at the map, and I got a couple of upgrades. I won't say anything obviously because I want to keep it a surprise. But a lot of the I got through a lot in the first hour and 20 minutes. It was good enough to show me exactly what's on offer.
Cool. That's good to hear. I like the idea that the game picks up quickly.
It does. Yeah.
Okay, so this one comes from Coop at Tetra Comet on Twitter, who wrote in and said, "Tell me, Richard, how does the frame rate hold up on Dread? Is it a solid 60 FPS?"
So I didn't have the means to check. I wasn't even allowed to take my own headphones in, so there was no video capture. It was only very strict, like over the shoulder stuff. From what I can tell, it's 60 frames, or very close to, probably 55, 58. There are quick cutscenes which do test the Switch quite a lot. Now, don't quote me on this, but it dropped slightly now and then.
Okay.
Very, 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 very briefly when I played it, the first couple of hours of the game. But it was never really noticeable enough during gameplay. The transitions were smooth, but there was just, I think, a couple of occasions where it dipped probably to 30 very briefly.
Okay. A little stuttering,
but
not the worst.
But I'm sure, no, exactly. But it doesn't take away at all from the experience.
Reminds me of something like Link's Awakening, where it's like that was like a consistent issue, but it's like, it's not really getting in the way of you enjoying it.
Yeah. I mean, or even Breath of the Wild, like you go into the forest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like game over, you know.
Didn't they patch that as well? Like within the first 20 few days, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I was like, I can look around the Master Sword without my eyes hurting. Great.
Yeah.
So this one comes from Ross JD at DarksideRJD on Twitter, who wrote in and said, "What balance is there in Metroid Dread between old school Metroid game nostalgia and new mechanics to make it a bit more modern?" So you talked a little bit about like the survival element and some of that kind of stuff, but like aside from that, like maybe new weapons, anything like that you can talk about that you felt fresh?
Yeah, so I think as a whole, the Metroid series has evolved, obviously, but you will get the stuff you love in there. You, excuse me, you've got your morph ball, you've got your grappling, you've got some other things that I won't talk about, but there are a few power ups in there which do stand out, but you know how to use them as soon as as soon as you get them, you know kind of what you're looking for. Whereas the new mechanic really is the Emmy robot. Does that count as a mechanic?
I'd say yeah.
Probably. I really do think that's kind of the main selling point here. The whole Emmy thing. I can't express how much, pardon the pun, dread you feel when you when you go into an Emmy controlled area. But I think there's enough there. I think there's they're not reinventing the series. They can't. They won't do that. And I'm glad from what I can tell, they haven't changed the whole game. Do you know what I mean? That it's going to feel familiar, and I think it's going to be good for people who haven't played much Metroid or 2D Metroid. A lot of people, I think, are going to play this, and it will be their first 2D Metroid. Considering their age, and the only time they've probably played as Samus is in Smash Brothers. So I mean, it's quite accessible, and I think it stays faithful. But there are a few twists and turns, especially with what you can with what you can do in the game. But I'm not obviously going to say anything.
There was a question I had regarding like weapons and everything. I played Super Metroid this past summer. This is my first 2D Metroid game, so just jumped into it. The thing that I think they did really well with it, but it's also like I want to see how a modern kind of controller handles this thing. But item selection, or I guess weapon selection in Super Metroid is like you use the select button on the controller basically, and it's like, oh, I'm switching from my gun to my missiles to these bombs or whatever. How is that kind of like handled or improved in Dread?
So I mean, it's a fairly easy control method to get used to. I have tripped up a few times where I've brought out one weapon when I really should not have brought that weapon out in a certain area, which you should not use a weapon in. But yeah, and as kind of newbie as I sound, I looked on the like item select screen quite often, and just to get myself used to controls. There are certain nods. There are certain, it's on the Switch, so little animations don't go unnoticed. There are certain things Samus will do which will indicate what she's preparing in certain scenarios, and I think that really does help. And the upgraded sound as well. I know it sounds really odd because usually you think, oh, I press this to do this, but it's when she does something, you think, oh crap, no, I don't need that, and you change. I did trip up a few times, and there were times when my thumb really hurt. But yeah, it might take a little getting used to, but it is a lot better than what you described.
Okay, cool.
How do you get into that screen? Is it like a wheel? Is it just like you press the minus button and it brings up a screen?
You just have to press one button to get into that. To get into, you can't. You pause the game essentially, and you can just kind of go back to, so say if you're by the end of the game, for instance, if you're overloaded with power-ups, you think, oh my god, I can't remember how to use a certain power-up, the option, I believe, is there to kind of look in and reacquaint yourself with how you get it, which I may have done quite a lot.
It's like, yeah, it took up 20 minutes of my hour and 20 minutes playing the game, looking at that screen. But tell you what, it's a great screen.
And then I looked through your kind of what you wrote up for the preview as well, and you mentioned that you can like aim 360 degrees at basically any point. Is that just like the second stick, the right stick, that takes control of that?
No, so when you're running, I'm just trying to think now. Use the L button, and she can aim in any direction. But then that's when she stands still and does that. If you're running, and you want to free aim, I haven't really used it a lot in my playthrough from what I've played so far, but you can run with the left stick and also fire with the left stick as well. But if you want to her to stand still, she'll bring out a really thin laser beam, and the laser will show you where you're tilting, and it's got a really nice little kind of, I think it's got a nice little rumble to it as well, and it's got a sound cue, so when you're over an item, block, or enemy that can be shot at, it will light up, and you can also feel it as well in the
cool.
HD rumble.
Oh, okay.
So it's really it's a slight little nod, but it helped me a lot in my playthrough.
That sounds great. So this was the last question we have from the community on Metroid, and I want to make sure we get this one in, because you have a hard out coming up, right? We gotta get you out of here in a few minutes. You got a little bit more time?
Yeah, we've got a bit more time.
All right, cool, great, awesome. Because we do have a few other questions, but I wanted to make sure we hit this one. This one comes from Affy Lockhart, one of our Patreon supporters, who wrote in and said, "Do you think Metroid Dread will be the big hit that it deserves to be, and give some much needed love to the franchise, as it always feels like Metroid flies under the radar?" That's something we've been talking about a lot with regard to Metroid Dread, right? Like, obviously, there were, there was like the excitement around the announcement of Dread, and then we had that report about how it was like the most pre-ordered Metroid of all time, and like there seems to be a lot of momentum behind the game. Based on what you've seen of it and the quality that you feel like it's achieving, do you feel like this is going to kind of be that moment for Metroid? Could this be a coming out party for it, where it really puts itself squarely on that A tier of Nintendo franchises? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. And, it's got a tough job. The fans will love it because it's a Metroid game. But you have to remember that the install base for the Switch is huge. It's absolutely huge. So, it's obviously not the same as Wii, I believe, last time I checked. But the install base is massive. And the amount of money that Nintendo are clearly putting into this marketing, they're putting a lot of effort into it, and they're putting a lot of money into it. And I think this will be the breakthrough that Metroid will have. Just because I just have a good feeling about it. And I think from what I've played, it's definitely a contender for Game of the Year. Definitely.
Cool.
Especially in Nintendo's bracket. I can see it doing really well. Will it shift systems? I hope so. Do I wish that they had a special edition, because they love doing that? I do wish they did, but they've got the OLED. That's been their flagship for the OLED.
Yeah.
And that's got to show you how much faith they have in the game. But yeah, I truly believe this is going to sell a lot of units.
And let me ask you this. I guess it's kind of a slightly different question, but somewhat related. How do you feel about the price point based on what you've played? I know there's been a lot of debate about it being a $60, box title in that way, where I think a lot of people look at a Metroidvania or 2D games in general sometimes as something that maybe shouldn't cost that much. I don't agree with that per se, but I'm interested to hear what you think, since you've actually gotten to spend some time with it.
So my view of value for games is, I don't really... I value a game on the experience it gives me, no matter how long it is. I can play a 2-hour indie game and spend £30 on it, and prefer it to a 60-hour, 50 quid game. As long as that game has provided me, like I bought Omno. I don't know if you've heard of Omno. I crowdfunded it and helped on the Kickstarter, and that's an indie game that lasted 3.5 hours, but I still spent money on it. And that's one of my favorite games this year. And I think in terms of Metroid Dread, I can't say for sure at the moment. You'll have to read my review later this week.
And where can they find that?
They go mynintendonews.com. But value for money is a bit of an odd one. There's no yes or no answer. It's really how you perceive value for your entertainment. But personally, it's a AAA game. There's no denying that. So if you're willing to pay it, then so be it.
Awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear that. So this is a fun question, and this one we can open up to the whole bench here. So this one comes from Alex L. Duffy on Twitter, who wrote in and said, "What Switch game are you excited to revisit on the Switch OLED?" I think for me, the first one that comes to mind is I've never replayed Breath of the Wild, and I've been talking about doing it for forever, and Breath of the Wild 2 doesn't seem to be coming out anytime soon, so maybe now's the time, you know?
I think that's a good contender.
Mine would be Splatoon. Even though I play it all the time anyway.
Can't wait to replay it.
3's coming out. Even though Splatoon 3 is coming out next year, I just know how vivid and vibrant and beautiful that would look on the OLED screen. And I kind of want to see what it looks like on it now.
But handheld, though, ouch.
Splatoon, yeah, I know, that's the only problem. It's not good.
I don't know about that.
It's so funny. I have played a lot of handheld Splatoon because like it became like I'm gonna watch TV and play this, and it's like, man, it's so much harder.
No, you got to do it. That's the only time I ever use tabletop mode. I'll put it on my coffee table, and I play with the Pro Controller. Yep. It's ridiculous.
Well, and that's the thing. When we were talking about the new kickstand and everything, and Richard, you were saying like, oh yeah, like you might actually want to play in with the kickstand now. I'm like, oh boy, like this is a whole new era for Splatoon for me here.
You're a Nintendo fan when we get excited over a kickstand, but it really is so much better. It's like a big paddle. It will change your world.
That little kickstand just gives me nothing but anxiety. I remember the last time I seriously tried to use it. I think it was during I was playing Splatoon, and I put it on my coffee table, and like one of my cats like jumped up on my leg that was on the table, and it shook, and the Switch just fell over. And I was like, all right, this is untenable. We can't be trusting this kickstand.
It was so bad. I don't know if you guys have it, but just these you have to get one of these. It's one of those official stands. Do you guys have them over there?
I have one of those.
I've seen them, but I don't own one. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's official. We
recognize that the base kickstand is garbage, so we've made an additional product you can spend more money on.
Worth it.
It kind of reminds me of the Kid Icarus game accessory you got on 3DS. Do you remember to stop the hand cramps? But
they're like, we probably should have put a second stick on this thing, huh? Well, here you go, $20. All right, so this could be our last question for the day here. This one comes from Ravenous Richard at EMH_Richard, who wrote in and said, "How believable is Nintendo when they're denying a 4K Switch model?" I mean, I don't believe them at all, right?
No,
I think
me neither.
Nintendo's.
I posted my thoughts on Twitter about this. It was like, they've got an OLED Switch coming out on Friday. They're not exactly going to come out and go, yeah, you know what? There's a new 4K model coming out next year, so don't buy the OLED model. You don't want that one because there's going to be a new one next year. They're not going to do it. It's never going to happen.
They've also done this before, right? Like how quickly we forget, right? That they've this exact thing where they're like, oh yeah, we have nothing to announce at this time. We're not working on a new Switch. Oh, by the way, here's the handheld only Switch SKU that we figured would be coming at some point, right? Okay, it's real. They did this with the 2DS.
Like every single time they deny these things, I'm just like, great, we're gonna hear about it in a few months. We'll see.
Yeah, it's like
I think their way around it is, yes, fine, fair enough. We won't get a 4K Switch. I think that's perfectly acceptable. We've got the halfway mark with the OLED, but a 4K enabled dock, however, is definitely. I can guarantee you it's in the works. And I know someone's done a teardown of the OLED dock, and the OLED dock, I'm not technical, so I'm not going to start saying DLSS and all this rubbish. I don't know what I'm on about when I talk about that. But there is definitely a sign showing that it could do 4K according to this YouTuber. So I think the dock is the way forward. I think the dock definitely is going to be the way forward.
That's awesome. Whenever these rumors come up, I'm just like, oh man, It's just really surprising to me that this company that focuses on making video games and consoles is actually working on a new game or console.
It's like, yeah, what do you think
wow.
Nintendo R&D is doing right now? Just sitting on their hands, like, oh, eventually they'll come up with a second idea. It's like, no, of course they're working on a 4K Switch.
6
Will we
years
ever
in
see
advance.
it? I don't know, but probably. Like,
Yeah.
it might be the successor to the Switch, but the idea that they're not working on a 4K version of this technology seems pretty much impossible.
Would you want a 4K Switch now? Honestly, you three?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
yes.
mean,
Like if there was one, I would absolutely take it. I remember when we were talking about the idea of a Switch Pro that was like a 1080 screen and it does 4K docked and whatever. Yeah, like I could see the appeal of that, but I really don't feel like I feel like we only need it docked. Like I don't really need 4K handheld. I don't feel like you're going to be able to appreciate
I
the
agree,
difference
but
on such a small screen.
I would.
I
'cause-
want the firepower that it's got, or the horsepower to give me, faster frame rates on handheld. Because you mentioned Bowser's Fury earlier. I played that
Yeah.
exclusively docked because it was 60 frames per second docked, and it was
Right.
cut all the way down to 30 handheld, and it was just a far inferior experience on handheld. I kind of want those to be equal, and I feel like if we got something with a little bit more horsepower, we'd be
And I
able
would
to get that and still
Yeah.
output 4K.
And I would say yes too, because like that last question about like what game would you want to revisit? I would want to revisit Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and that game is absolute garbage in handheld mode. It's so low resolution, it looks terrible, the frame rates are bad. And I'm just like, if I could get that like 4K experience in handheld, yeah, that'd be great. Because it's a very long RPG that I'm like, oh, I want to lay in bed while I play this.
A comfort game. I think to go against like all of you personally.
Hit us with a hot take. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't. The Switch isn't a powerful console. Developers need to know their way around it to exploit the great graphic capabilities. I think all we'll be doing is was just circumventing around the issue, and the issue here at the moment is its horsepower. Like Steve said, it's just not powerful enough. Yeah, give you 4K, but all you're doing is sharpening up the rough edges it has anyway.
Yeah.
So, I think there needs to be a proper advancement. I've got a Series X and I've got a PS5, and I've never been one for graphics ever. However, going from one to the other is a really Nintendo say it's halfway through its life cycle, but there really needs to be a beefed up version of this.
Yeah.
I don't know how they'll do it, but I think it's time. The games are great, don't get me wrong, but just having a 4K upscale is probably not the answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would agree with you definitely where that's concerned. And I think that the next gen consoles are the thing that has made me feel that way so much, is that like I also have a Series X and a PS5. And I went from being somebody who used my Switch every single day to now I use my Switch when there's a game I want to play on it,
Game Pass.
And I mean, it's like there is that kind of. And I feel like even more aggressively this stance too, where we'll see like, oh, there's a cloud version of this game, and it's like, why would anyone want to play this on Switch? Like, why would anyone want to play a decidedly worse version of a game that you could play on Xbox or PlayStation? And I think I don't want the Switch to be, and I know this is just how some gamers are going to treat any Nintendo console, but I don't want the Switch to just be my Nintendo machine, right? Like I want it to be a game or a console where I'm actively seeking out new, fresh indies and, third-party titles and all those kinds of things that, that I feel like have defined the Switch in so many ways. It's not just the marquee Nintendo stuff. It's those and everything that's in between, and lately I've noticed myself being like, oh, well, I could play this on Switch, or I could grab it for free on Game Pass and it'll look better and run better. I want those extra quality of life upgrades, but also I feel like we need a little more under the hood.
Definitely, and I think the days of it's the Mario machine, it's the Mario Kart this and yes, fair enough, you can't play it anywhere else, but I completely agree with you. I think now is the time we need to start looking at The OLED is great. Don't get me wrong. However, then now is the time to start closing that gap between next gen and Nintendo. And online. Let's not even get onto that. That's a whole different podcast.
We'll have to have you back for a second episode on that one. I know you gave us 10 more minutes, and we're already up against that. So we'll have to have you back, and we can pull apart Nintendo's online strategy piece by piece. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge here today. I thought this was a great episode, great conversation. I'm sure our listeners will find that it was similarly illuminating. So before we jump, let everybody know where they can find you and keep up with you on Twitter, all that stuff.
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope everyone is looking forward to the big launch on Friday for Metroid Dread and OLED models Switch. I can't wait to see everyone's bits and pieces about that. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Nintendomau5, Nintenmau5. I'll give you a little follow back as well. Or, of course, read my words on mynintendonews.com. You can also find me on gpn.gg for some Xbox stuff. And if you would like to have a look at our all-inclusive Discord server, you can go on the Together We Play Twitter account, which is at TogetherWePlay_, because Together We Play was already taken. So yeah, you are more than welcome to join.
I know that pain. I am at @loud_Pete because somebody took that when Twitter started and has made one tweet, never touched it again. Totally ruined my branding. Unbelievable.
Awful business. Thank you again, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then, of course, you know how to find us. We're at Flipscreen Games, wherever you get your video game content, where they're making something for you. If you head over to flipscreen.games, that's our website. We have links to our Twitch, our social media, our Discord, all that stuff. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll come and become part of the community we're building here. It's a great, fun, inclusive place to talk games, and we would love to have you come join us. And then, of course, if you want to get some more content from us, we've got our sister show, Flipscreen Games. Every week we talk about stuff outside the world of Nintendo. And then you can also go check out our Patreon exclusive stuff, our Twitch streams. We're all over the place. Keep up with us over on Twitter. We don't tweet that often, but it's always a good one. So Steve can guarantee that because he does the tweets. Okay, so thank you guys for joining us here on another episode of Nintendo Noise. We will see you next week.